Hello, thank you for tuning in to today's webcast from jakobmat@yahoo.com. My name is James, and I wanted to introduce this series of webcasts, tell you a little bit more about who I am, what this broadcast is about, and a little bit too. I want you to understand my background, so you'll understand my biases, and you can make sense of them as you see fit with that full awareness of information. So first, who am I? Well, I'm James Branham. By the name of my website, jakobmat@yahoo, is from the Hebrew words for my first and middle names, James and Matthew. So that's where I get it from. I did not grow up Jewish. I rather grew up in a more fundamentalist Christian background. Over time, my faith and theology evolved. Today, I'm a very open-minded Mennonite, and also very universalist in my beliefs, meaning that I believe God is too big to fit into any one religion, and that there's lots of ways to understand God, and that religions are all really everyone's best attempt to try to understand a little bit about the divine. So out of that universalist perspective, about 2 years ago, my wife and I began an exploration into Judaism. The story behind that's too long to go into here. I may share a link here in the comments of this video later of my wife's blog post on kaveller.com talking about this. But it began about 2 years ago at Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. It was a powerful time for my wife, an anniversary of her cancer diagnosis from I think about 4 or 5 years ago at that point, and a celebration of her survival and of her new life. In the years that followed, we became more deeply immersed in Jewish faith practices and rituals. We'll stop for just a second here. The car goes by. So we became more immersed in the Jewish faith practices and rituals. We began observing Shabbat, the Jewish Sabbath, beginning with the Friday night suppers. Later on, continuing the observance some into Saturday. We also started doing many of the Jewish holidays, which was a joyous time for our family. We really found that the Jewish holidays were extremely family-friendly and very engaging to a young boy. And we liked the fact that these rituals were very much rooted in the context of the family. They didn't require us to go someplace else, but it was something that made our family life more holy and more reverent and brought meaning to even the silly things, the little things. It all had new meaning. And so that's why we continue to do these rituals and observe these practices. As for my own journey, the one thing I want to share as it relates to this webcast series was this last year in Shavuot, which is the Jewish holiday that celebrates the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. I wanted to do something to reconnect in a deeper way with Torah. Now, Torah traditionally means a lot of things. It means laws, instructions, commandments. In its more narrow definition, it refers to the first 5 books of the Jewish scriptures, the 5 books of Moses, they're commonly called. A more broad definition is the entire Jewish scripture canon, the Tanakh. An even broader definition includes the oral Torah, all of the traditions over time, the rabbinical traditions about what do these laws mean and how do we interpret these very old texts into a new context. But for my purposes here, I really wanted to connect that most narrow definition of Torah, those 5 books, understanding them as central to the Jewish faith, and also the Christian faith for that matter, and wanting to understand them in some new ways, particularly looking at them in a Jewish way. And so I decided to make a practice of reading through the Torah in the coming year, and to do so in a Jewish framework. What I mean is by studying it in the context of the parashah, the Torah portions that are read each week traditionally in Jewish synagogues. It's a different way of reading. It's anywhere from 2, 4, 5 chapters or so, but it's not in chapters and verses. And so it's a different way of reading. Stories that often I would have thought of as being separate in the Jewish context are read together. At the same time, it gives you a little bit of a wider angle lens. And also, there's this idea of the rhythm, a liturgical year, much like the Christian calendar, but a little bit different too. And so I wanted to connect with that in this new way. And so also, though, I didn't want to just study it for myself, but I wanted to respond to it. There's things about the Torah that I find inspiring and deeply moving. There's things that I'll find extremely troubling and difficult and worth wrestling with. And so that's part of this webcast series too, is to delve into what I find difficult. And so I've been writing some already on my blog at jakobmat@yahoo.com, but I also will be producing these webcasts of giving a little bit of Torah conversation about these texts. So anyway, that's a little bit about who I am and what I'm doing here. And I want to share a little bit of my approach in engaging with the Torah and also engaging with Jewish worship practices. First of all, my approach is universalist, meaning that I don't believe that any one group has a lock on the truth. In other words, I believe we can learn and share from each other. At the same time, I want to be faithful to the Jewish tradition. What I mean by that is I'm not going to impose Christian or any other interpretations on a particular passage, but rather, as much as possible, ask what have Jews historically said about this text. There is, of course, point where I'm going to say what I think about the text, and it's going to be shaped by a lot of things, but I really want in this year to spend as much time as possible engaging with historic Jewish teaching on these texts, and examining that first before I form my own opinion. Secondly, my approach is going to be intellectually open-minded. What I mean by that is that I am not a fundamentalist, I am not a literalist. I do not believe that Moses wrote the 5 books by hand himself. Maybe he had a hand in it, maybe he didn't. Probably not, to be honest. I think there was a previous oral tradition. At some point, these books were written. At some point, various textual traditions were combined to form the books we have today. And so because of that, I'm going to ask some tough questions. I'm also going to ask questions where the text seems to violate basic norms of humanity and conscience. Issues of genocide, as we'll talk about later in the broadcast that will be happening for this week, is one of the issues that will come up when we'll be talking about it. I'm going to say when I disagree with the text. When I think it's full of crap, I'm going to say so. At the same time, I'm also going to seek to find the inspiring, life-affirming parts of the text and engage with it, wrestle with it. In fact, that's an important thing about the Jewish tradition, is that it prizes the idea of wrestling with text, of wrestling with ideas, of not just accepting what someone has said before, but actually digging in yourself and then arguing it. You do consider yourself, but then you take it into the context of community and you argue it together. And so that's what I'll be doing here. And I hope that you'll join the conversation through the comments and on the Facebook page for yakubmud@yahoo.com. Finally, I'm going to be taking a devotional approach as well, not just academic. What I mean by that is that I believe that these texts have something to say to us today. That there's something for them that will draw us closer to the divine, to the Holy One. And that even the troubling text, there's something there for us. And so I'm approaching it from that standpoint. It's a bit of a leap of faith to say that. At the same time, I'm also still keeping my brain engaged. I'm not turning off my brain, but rather I'm trying to be true to my heart, true to my conscience, but also intellectually honest. That will be a difficult task, but that's what I'm going to attempt to do. And then finally, I'm going to frame these Torah conversations in the context of Jewish worship. The reason for that, again, is the devotional aspect, is that this is not purely an academic study. These are not just lectures, but I'm trying to engage in other ways, in spiritual dynamics. And so because of that, I'll be leading a period of worship. And it'll be mostly situated around a Shabbat service. And this will be somewhat non-traditional. I'm basing this in large part after what I've learned from watching some other online Jewish worship services from oneshul.com, My Jewish Community, I think it's myjewishcommunity.com or .org, I can't remember. And then also the Sim Shalom. Those 3 communities have really inspired me to see what's possible with this kind of online setting. And so I'm basing it some off of them. And I'm also borrowing one of the things that all 3 of those groups do, and that is they borrow freely from the prayers. They use those that fit their context well. They don't use those that don't. And so that's what I'll be doing. As far as a prayer book, I'll be mostly using the One Shul Community Siddur, or prayer book. And if you want to follow along in some of these prayers, it would be really great if you did. You can buy it online. I think it's around $7-8. I know I have it for the Nook, the Barnes & Noble e-reader. I'm pretty sure they have it for Kindle and for other e-readers too. It's very affordable compared to some of the other Siddurim out there. So I encourage you to check it out. I'll be giving the page numbers for the prayers that are in the book. I may be using some other prayer books too occasionally. I really like the Book of Jewish Blessings by Marcia Falk. That's rooted in the Jewish feminist tradition and non-theistic traditions. So I may be using that some as well, but for now, I'll be just using the One Shul Community Siddur. Also, I want to encourage you, if you're watching, and if you feel inspired to do so, you are welcome to participate in the rituals. What I mean by that is certainly you can just watch this and enjoy it, but if you want to go a step further, When I light the candles at Shabbat, you at home can have your own candles in front of you and can light them. If you have your family or friends over, you can have them come to the table with you for this time. If you want to, you can bless the bread. You can bless the wine. Having those things ready for you is a good way of being ready for that. And just participate when I'm blessing the bread and wine, you do so as well. Also a note about the bread. Traditionally, challah bread is used. It's a beautiful egg-washed bread. If you want to make it, my wife knows some good recipes. I might ask her in a future webisode maybe to provide one of them. But there's some good recipes online. A lot of good bakeries will have challah bread. That said, I don't have challah bread right now, so when I do the service for this week, it'll probably just be using matzah bread, which is the Jewish unleavened bread. But for that matter, it can be any bread. There's no rule that it has to be challah bread or that it has to be matzah or anything else. You can use whatever bread you have handy. I've even heard of people using fry bread from Native American tradition or tortillas in the Hispanic tradition for the bread for Shabbat, and that's completely fine too. The key is that these are participatory acts, that we're not just watching, but we are actually participating and engaging with it. And finally, I would encourage you to think about these services, if you find them meaningful, to consider using this as a springboard for deeper Shabbat observance. And I'll be upfront with you, my family, we struggle with this. We do a lot of good Shabbat suppers on Friday nights, but carrying it into Saturday is really hard. And so I'm challenging myself as well as you to think about what we can do to take Shabbat to the next level. And finally, in the Jewish tradition, time is important. Actual chronological time. The Shabbat is actually is based upon some of the traditions say when you see 3 stars in the sky at that point of after sunset. The challenge, though, is on the internet, we're dealing with different time zones. And we're also dealing with just the logistical difficulties. For instance, my family, we have a Shabbat supper that I want to participate in. And so I'm going to be leading these services, but it won't be a live broadcast. Also, frankly, I tried the live broadcast and the internet connection was bad. So we'll be doing this as a pre-recorded thing. In the future, I may try doing it as a live broadcast again. But for now, it'll be recorded. You can watch it anytime, of course, but if you want to make it special, watch it on Shabbat, which would be Friday night in your local area at around sunset. In this neck of the wood, it's around 9 o'clock at night, but it'd be different depending on where you're at in the world. So, something to consider. Anyway, that's the introduction. The next service, actually the first week service, will be on the Torah passage called Matot. So if you want to look at that ahead, feel free, and we'll be broadcasting that hopefully later today. Thank you so much, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. My contact information is on my website at yakobmatityahu.com. That is YACOBMATITYHU.com. Thank you, and shalom.